My son told me I was too ugly to attend his wedding, so I changed my will and left him nothing. Okay, so I have been putting off recording this for 2 weeks now because every time I sit down to talk about it, I either get too angry or I start crying. And neither one of those is the energy I want to bring to this. But I need to get it out. I need somebody to hear this. So here we go. My son told me I was too ugly to come to his wedding. That is the sentence, and I have been turning it over in my head for 2 weeks, trying to find a different way to interpret it. But there is no other way to interpret it. He didn't say it exactly like that, but that is exactly what he meant, and I think we all know it. He came over on a Tuesday afternoon. I had cookies out, because I always have something out when Tobias comes over. I have been doing that since he was 4 years old, and I am not about to stop now. He walked in, did not look at the cookies, did not look at the tea I had brewing, just sat on the edge of my couch like he already knew this was going to be a short visit, and told me he did not think I should come to the wedding. I said, "What do you mean you don't think I should come?" He said it was a very curated event, modern aesthetic, and I had been sick, the scarf, the chemo, the coughing. He said it might make the guests uncomfortable. So I would make the guests uncomfortable. At my own son's wedding. I am sitting here now trying to think of what I should have said, and I still cannot think of a single thing because my brain just stopped working when those words came out of his mouth. And then his fiancée, Kendra, walked in right behind him without knocking. Just walked into my house like she had been there 100 times before. Started looking around my living room like she was appraising it for sale. And after a minute, she looked at me and said maybe after the honeymoon we should start thinking about long-term care options for you. Somewhere peaceful, clean, long-term care, in my own house, looking right at me. I said she means a nursing home. She smiled and said, "We just want what is best for you, Miss Clara. I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me in the comments. If someone came into your home and suggested you be put away while you were sitting right there in front of them, what would you have done? Because I genuinely want to know if I handled this wrong." I sat there in my lavender blouse, the one with the little pearl buttons Tobias used to play with as a baby, and I did not say a single word, waiting for him to say something, to correct her, to be my son. He did not say anything. Before they left, Tobias kissed the top of my scarf, right on the top of my head, the way you kiss someone who is already somewhere else in their mind, like he was practicing a goodbye he had already decided on. Then they were gone, and I was alone in my house with the warm tea and the untouched cookies and the sound of nothing. Okay, let me back up, because you need to know who I am before the rest of this makes sense. My name is Clara. I am 75 years old, and I have lived in the same house in Atlanta for 31 years. I raised Tobias in this house by myself after his father walked out when the boy was 4. I worked hospital housekeeping for 22 years on night shifts, the kind of work that settles into your knees and your back and never fully leaves. And I wore shoes until the soles came apart, and I brought my lunch every single day, and I said no to myself so many times for so long that no became my default. But here is the thing nobody knew. The whole time, I was quietly building something. Not quietly like it was a secret exactly, more like quietly because nobody ever thought to ask. I bought my first rental property in my late 30s, a rundown duplex around the corner from where we lived. An elderly woman had passed, and her family just wanted it gone. And I had a small inheritance from my aunt, and I used every dollar of it to make a bid. I fixed that place up little by little, on weekends and after shifts, when my feet were already killing me. And I rented it out. And suddenly there was extra money coming in every month that had not been there before. So I bought another property, then a third. Then I put money into a beauty salon my church friend Sheila was trying to start, because I had watched Sheila work herself half to death for years, and I believed in her. Nobody knew any of it. Not Tobias, not my neighbors, not a single person in my life, because I never talked about money, and I never talked about the properties, and I never gave anyone a reason to think I was anything other than a woman who clipped coupons and worked night shifts. I still clipped coupons at the grocery store, still wore the same shoes, because the money was not for me, you understand? It was always going to be for him, That was the whole plan. When I was gone, Tobias would get everything, and there would be a letter explaining it all, telling him that the woman he thought had nothing had been quietly building a future for him across all those night shifts and all those years of saying no to herself. I had even written him birthday letters, one for every year until he turned 50, all of them sitting in a shoebox under my bed. I was going to surprise him. I had been planning that surprise for 20 years, and then a Tuesday afternoon happened, and the plan died. Now let me tell you the last thing Tobias said before he walked out, because this is the part I have been sitting with the most, and I need to say it out loud. He stood up from my couch and gave me the standard "we love you, Mom" that he gives at the end of every difficult conversation, the one that sounds rehearsed because it is. And then right at the door, he turned around and said it. "This is why Dad left you." Lord, he said it like he had been saving it for years, like he had been waiting for exactly the right moment to use it, and he finally found one. I need you to understand something about that statement. His father did not leave because of anything I did or anything I was. Michael left because he did not want to be a parent or a partner or anything that required him to show up consistently for another person. I worked 2 jobs while he found himself, and then he left anyway. But I never told Tobias that. I gave his father the gentler story because I thought that was what a good mother did. You protect your child from the ugly version of things. You let him grow up believing his father was just broken, rather than that his father just did not want to stay. I protected Michael's image for 20 years, and Tobias used it to cut me. I sat there after the door closed with my hands on my knees, just breathing. Not crying, not screaming, just sitting in the quiet, trying to understand how we got here. That is still my son. That is still the boy I rocked to sleep and packed lunches for and sat in bleachers in January for and drove to college visits and called every Sunday. And he just stood in my doorway and threw his father at me like a weapon. Something shifted in me that night, and I want to be careful about how I describe it, because I do not want you to think I'm talking about anger. It was not anger. It was something quieter and colder and more permanent than anger. The kind of internal shift that happens when you finally stop pretending about something you have known for a while. That night, I sat in my recliner and I did not move for a long time. I had on my old flannel robe, the one I have had since Tobias was in high school, and the streetlight outside was blinking the way it has been blinking for 10 years that I keep meaning to call the city about and never do. Just sitting there, hands folded, hearing his voice. "You will ruin the photos. You will make everyone uncomfortable. This is why Dad left you." I need to say something about that last one. People always say you cannot let other people's words live in you. You have to let it go, all that. But some things land different when they come from your child. When the person who says it is someone you pushed into the world with your own body and stayed up with for nights on end and sacrificed things for that you can never get back. That is when words land somewhere permanent. His father left because he was a coward, not because of me. Michael did not want the work of being a parent, and when things got hard, he chose himself and he left. And I spent 20 years giving Tobias the softer version of that story because I thought it was the kind thing to do. I told Tobias his father was broken, not that his father just did not want to stay. That was a mistake I made out of love, and Tobias used it as ammunition. I got up eventually and went to my bedroom and got on my knees in front of the old filing cabinet at the bottom of my closet. Inside it, under decades of tax returns and birth certificates and old utility bills I cannot bring myself to throw away, was a folder I labeled in black marker a long time ago. Final. I carried it to the bed and opened it slowly. My will was in there, my life insurance policies, the deeds to the 3 rental properties, bank statements with balances that would genuinely surprise anyone who had watched me clip coupons my whole life. And right at the top of the beneficiary section was Tobias's name. I sat there looking at his name for a long time, long enough for the house to get cold, long enough for the streetlight outside to stop blinking and just go steady. Then I tore the will in half, then in quarters, kept going until the pieces were small enough that I could hold them all in one hand. I sat there with those pieces and breathed. The air in that room actually felt lighter after, like something that had been pressing down and finally lifted. Next morning, I called Monique. Now, for those of you who do not know who Monique is, Monique Chambers has been my best friend since we were both 19 years old, singing in the choir at our church, back when we were young enough to think our lives were going to be simpler than they turned out to be. We have held each other through things I do not even want to name out loud: funerals, marriages that fell apart, children who disappointed us, diagnoses that changed everything. When she picked up the phone that morning, she already knew something had happened, just from the way I said her name. I told her all of it. What Tobias said about the aesthetic, what Kendra said about long-term care, the last thing he said at the door, all of it. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Clara, I saw the wedding announcement. Your name was not in it anywhere." I said, "I know. I need you to come over today. I need to rewrite the will." She said, "Are you absolutely sure about this?" And here is where I want to check in with you, because I have been asking myself this question for months. Was I sure? Am I still sure? Drop something in the comments, because I want to know if you think what I did was right. Because I have gone back and forth on it, and I keep landing in the same place, but I want to hear from other people. I told Monique I was sure. I said, "I may be dying, but I am not dead yet, and today I am taking back what belongs to me." She was at my door by noon. Now here's where I want to talk to you directly for a minute, because I think this is important and I do not want it to get lost in the story. I already know some of you are thinking, "Clara, that is bitterness. That is a hurt woman making a decision she is going to regret later." And I understand why it looks that way from the outside. I really do. But let me tell you what was actually going through my mind that morning. That money was mine. I built it on night shifts and coupons and decades of saying no to myself. And the law says I have the absolute right to decide where it goes. Always. The only thing that changed on that Tuesday was my understanding of who the right person was to receive it. Here is what I want every woman watching this to know. You have the right to change your will at any time, for any reason, and nobody can stop you. It doesn't matter if someone shares your blood. A good estate lawyer can make your wishes airtight, so they cannot be challenged after you are gone. And if you have not updated your documents in years, please go do that. Please, because your life changes and the people in it change, and your paperwork needs to reflect who you actually are right now. Not who you were before certain people showed you certain things. I learned this lesson later than I should have. Monique came in without knocking because she has never knocked at my door in 56 years of friendship, and she is not about to start now. She set her briefcase on the dining table, sat down across from me, and we got to work without a lot of talking about it, because sometimes the most loving thing a friend can do is just help you do the next thing. I gave her everything she needed: account numbers and property addresses and the name of my banker at Citizens Trust, and the title to the salon I co-own with Sheila. I even had $10,000 cash in an envelope in my sewing drawer that I had labeled "In Case the World Ends," which got a look from Monique, but no comment. And she listed every single asset without judgment. At the top of the new will, she wrote the name I had chosen: the Rose House Foundation. It is a women's shelter in South Carolina that takes in elderly women who have been abandoned by their families, women who have been made to feel like a burden just for still being alive, women who spend their days in rooms no one visits. I volunteered there years ago, and I painted walls and served food and sat with women who were too tired to read on their own. And I remember thinking, I never want to be one of these women. And then I became one of these women. I signed the new will with a hand that was shaking, but eyes that were not. Monique sealed everything and put it in her briefcase. Then she looked at me over the top of her reading glasses and said, "What do you want to do about the wedding?" I said, "I want to go." She raised one eyebrow, just one. That is a Monique thing. I said, "Not to cause trouble, not to ruin their day. I just want to be in the room. I want to see my son get married with my own eyes. And when it is over, I want him to know what I decided." She nodded once and said, "I will handle the envelope." 4 days before the wedding, an envelope showed up in my mailbox with gold lettering and embossed trim that I could feel with my fingers before I even opened it. It was not from Tobias. It was from cousin Renee. And if you have a Renee in your family, you already know what I'm talking about. She is always at every family event with a plate of something and a pocket full of everybody else's business. Inside was a card with calligraphy and a glossy photo of Tobias and Kendra standing under a white archway with smiles so polished I kept looking for the seam. At the bottom of the card, in smaller font, was a handwritten note from Renee that said, "We would love for you to join us." Quietly, of course. "Please sit in the designated family section and respect the couple's wishes." Quietly, of course. I read that twice, set the card on my counter, and knew immediately that I was going. Not for them, for myself. Because I had shown up for that boy every single day of his life, and I was not about to let the last image he had of me be a woman who stayed home. Morning of the wedding, I got up before the sun. I bathed slowly, put on my soft gray Easter suit, the one that still fits right and makes me feel like myself. Wrapped my head in my good blue scarf with the silver threading that I have had for years. Pinned on the brooch my mother gave me when I finished school, a small silver dove, worn smooth in places, but still holding its shape. And I thought about her when I pinned it on, and I thought she would understand what I was about to do. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. My body looked smaller than I remembered, more fragile, the kind of fragile that sneaks up on you when you're not paying attention, but my eyes were still exactly mine. Monique arrived on time, in her navy pantsuit, briefcase in hand, already in business mode. She had the manila envelope sealed with Tobias's name on the outside. I handed her a second smaller one. I said, "That one is for Kendra. Give it to her after." She said, "Clara, are you physically strong enough for this today?" I said, "Monique, I just need to see it. One time with my own eyes. That is all I am asking for." The vineyard was something. I am not going to lie. Green rows stretching up into the hills, white tents everywhere, string lights already on, even though it was still morning, a little string quartet playing near the entrance, guests floating around in pastels, like they had all agreed beforehand on exactly how elegant they were going to be. I sat in the car for a minute before getting out. He really did spare no expense, I thought. And then I thought, with what? Because the money I had been quietly building for 30 years was going to a women's shelter in South Carolina now. So whatever he spent, it was not my money. I just want to be clear about that. We walked to the designated family section. A few people nodded politely as we passed, and nobody recognized me, which was exactly what I had been told to aim for. The invisible woman in the third row. I sat down, quietly, just like the card said. The ceremony started, and Tobias came down the aisle looking sharp and proud and handsome in the way that still catches me sometimes. That is still my son up there, and I had to take a breath. I am going to be honest with you. I had to really take a breath. Because Kendra came down after him, and she was beautiful. The crowd sighed, and I understood in that moment why he chose her. I am not so far gone that I cannot see that, but understanding it did not make any of the rest of it okay. The officiant talked about unity and trust and honoring the people who shaped you. Tobias shifted when that part came. He did not look back, but he shifted. I noticed. The vows were long. Kendra cried during hers, and the whole crowd went awe, and I am sitting there in the third row, like a guest at someone else's wedding, trying to hold my face together. Tobias smiled that charm he has had since he was 12. They exchanged rings. They kissed. Everyone stood and applauded. I stayed in my seat, not out of spite. I just genuinely did not have the energy to stand, and I was not going to perform something I was not feeling for the benefit of people who did not know who I was. Monique leaned over and said quietly, "You want me to go now?" Let them have the moment. I meant it. When the guests started moving toward the reception tent, and Tobias and Kendra were over by the floral arch, taking photos and laughing and pulling each other close, I turned to Monique and gave her one nod. She stood up and walked toward them. And I want you to picture Monique doing this, because it is the most Monique thing that has ever happened. She moved without rushing, without drama, without any kind of announcement. Just a woman on a mission who has been doing difficult things with grace for 56 years and knows exactly how to move through a room. Kendra saw her coming first and got a confused look. Tobias turned around and his smile went still. Monique said, "Congratulations, this is from your mother." She handed Tobias his envelope, handed Kendra the smaller one. turned around and walked straight back to me without another word. And y'all, I watched him open that envelope from across the vineyard. I could see the exact moment his face changed. Confusion first, then something that looked like the ground shifting under him. And I thought, okay, he is reading it now. He is seeing it now. He looked up. Our eyes met across all that curated elegance, all those white flowers and string lights and carefully arranged moments. And I looked at my son from 30 feet away for the last time that day. I did not wave. I did not smile. I did not give him a reaction to work with. I picked up my cane and I walked back to the car. I had been there. I had seen it. And I was done. Does that make me cold? Tell me in the comments, because I still think about that moment and wonder if I should have walked up to him myself. But then I think about my scarf on my own head, like a tombstone pat, and the answer comes back the same every time. I did not need to watch what happened after Monique handed him that envelope. And honestly, I am glad I was not there for it, because I do not think I could have held my face together. Monique told me everything later, the way she always does, which is straight and plain and without any added drama or softening, just exactly what happened in the order it happened. She said Tobias stood there with the pages in his hands and went through 4 or 5 different expressions in less than a minute. Confusion first, then something she described as the floor dropping out from under him, that specific kind of disbelief that happens when a person realizes the thing they assumed was permanent has already been decided without them. The new will was in there. My letter was in there. Every document showing that everything I had built across all those decades was going to the Rose House Foundation, and not $1 of it was coming to him. Kendra had her own envelope, just a short note I wrote on ivory paper, and it said, "Kendra, I am not going to relive what you said to me in my living room, but I will say this. If you married Tobias thinking you were getting something, I suggest you make other plans. He has nothing now. He earned exactly what he got. Clara Massey." Monique said Kendra's face changed completely when she read it, and things started to fall apart after that. Not because I orchestrated it, but because the truth tends to land hard on people who built their whole life on what they assumed was coming. I was already home by then, sitting by my window with my tea. I had left my blue scarf folded on the third-row chair when I left, not as a statement or a symbol. I just did not need it anymore, and I thought if someone picks it up and wonders about it, let them wonder. He called me 3 days later. I answered because I am still his mother. That has not changed, and it is not going to change. I will always pick up when Tobias calls, and I think on some level he knows that, which maybe is its own kind of problem, but that is a different conversation. He said, "Mama, what did you do?" And his voice was shaking. I said, "I updated my will, Tobias. I had every right to do that. And I want to ask you something right now before I tell you what I said back. Am I wrong? I've been over this so many times, and I always arrive at the same place, but I want to know if any of you see it differently. Leave a comment, because I genuinely want to understand how other people look at this. I said, Tobias, I left you everything for 30 years. I left you my nights and my health and every dollar I scraped together on those hospital floors so you could grow up not having to scrape. What I changed was a document, and that document was always mine to change. He said, I cannot believe you would do this to me. And I thought about getting loud. Lord knows I had the material. I thought about the shoes I wore through to nothing, the birthday letters I burned in my kitchen trash the night he left, all those envelopes for every year until he turned 50, gone. The 20 years I spent protecting his father's name so Tobias could grow up with a kinder story than the true one. I had so much I could have said, but I did not say any of it. I said, Tobias, you sat on my couch and told me I would ruin your wedding just by being there. Your fiancé suggested I be put in a facility while I was sitting right in front of her. And you stood there with your arms folded, and you let her say it, and you said nothing. That is what I am responding to. He went quiet. I said, I am not calling it cruelty. I am calling it information. You showed me who you are, and I made my decisions based on that. That is the whole of it. He said, Mama, please. I said, I love you, and I will always love you. That part is not negotiable, and it never will be. But love does not mean I have to hand everything I built to someone who made me feel like I was ruining a room just by existing in it. Then I said goodbye, and I hung up. and I sat there for a good long while afterward, asking myself if I did the right thing. Did I really do the right thing? And then I remembered that woman in my living room suggesting I be put away, and my son standing right there, not making a sound. And the answer came back the same as it always does. I heard a few months later that the Rose House Foundation renamed their main building Massey Hall after donations started coming in. Women began sharing their own stories online. It spread further than I expected, and I did not ask for any of it, but I am glad it happened. Because if one woman watching this right now understands that she has the right to change her mind about where her legacy goes, then something good came out of everything that happened to me. Because I need you to understand what I was actually doing when I changed that will. I was not punishing Tobias. That is not who I am. I was a 75-year-old woman with a terminal diagnosis who looked at her legal documents one night and realized they no longer reflected what she actually believed. So she changed them. That is all it was. A woman exercising a legal right over something she built. And if you have a will sitting in a drawer somewhere that you haven't looked at in years, please go look at it. Your life has changed. The people in your life have changed. Your documents need to say what you mean right now, not what you meant before certain people showed you certain things. A good estate attorney can help you make it solid so nobody can challenge it later. That is not morbid. That is just taking care of yourself the same way you have been taking care of everyone else. The cancer went into remission 6 months after the wedding. I did not call Tobias to tell him, not because I wanted him to suffer with not knowing, but because that news belonged to me and to Monique and to Sheila and to the nurses who were there for every treatment, the ones who knew my name and brought me warm blankets and asked how I was actually doing. It did not belong to someone who had not called once through the whole thing. I am still in Atlanta, still in the same house I have been in for 31 years, still clipping coupons at the same grocery store. But here is what is different now, and I want you to really hear this part. I sleep well. I wake up in the morning and I make my tea and I sit by this window, and I do not feel like I am apologizing for taking up space. I do not feel like I am managing how much of myself I show, so nobody gets uncomfortable. I do not feel like I am the wrong thing in somebody else's carefully arranged room. That is what peace feels like when you finally stop spending it on people who didn't earn it. And I want that for every single woman watching this. So let me ask you something before I go. Have you ever given somebody everything you had and then found out later that they were keeping score of all the wrong things? That they were counting what you gave but not what it cost you? I know I am not the only one. Drop it in the comments because I think we need to talk about this more than we do. And if you are in something right now where someone in your life is making you feel like a burden or an inconvenience or an embarrassment, I want you to hear this from a 75-year-old woman in Atlanta who has been through it. You are not those things. You are a person with a name and rights and a life that belongs to you. And nobody gets to write your ending but you. Know what you own. Know what your name is on. Update your paperwork to reflect who you actually are right now. I gave Tobias 30 years, and I gave the women at the Rose House the rest. And I am at peace with both of those decisions in a way that I think would surprise people who saw what happened at that wedding. My name is Clara. I am 75 years old, and I am still right here in Atlanta, still sipping my tea by this window. If this story moved you, please share it, because there are women out there who need to know it is never too late to take back what is yours.